To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
Hello my dear grade 9 students. So in the earlier lessons we discussed several things related to our human body parts. Especially we discussed about the circulatory system, right? And previously to that we discussed about physical lessons or physics lessons. So these physics lessons usually reflect in about the forces and the pressure and all the other things that we deal in our day-to-day life. Now, after doing those lessons, now we are going to focus about a new lesson part. Now, here within this lesson part, we'll be mainly focusing about a concept which is regarding to a plant. So, this concept is the growth of a plant. So, especially within this lesson part, within the 7th lesson, my dear children, we'll be discussing and we'll be focusing about the substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant. So here mainly we are discussing about plant growth substances. Plant growth substances under the 7th lesson in your science syllabus. So when you take the growth of a plant, my dear children, right? A growth of a plant mainly occurs due to factors like water, sunlight, air. In here, when I'm mentioning about air, I can say several examples like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and even nitrogen as well. Okay. So then, my dear children, different kinds of minerals. So these factors are pretty much important for the development and for the growth of a plant. We already know these things, right? We know that sunlight and carbon dioxide gas is very important for the photosynthesis process. So plant satisfy their nutritional requirement by the photosynthesis process, by producing their food, by the production of their food, right? So if you take other factors like water and sunlight, those factors are also very much important or pretty much important for the photosynthesis process. So like I said, photosynthesis is mainly important for the growth of a plant, as it is the main method of receiving nutrition necessary for the plant, right? Other than those things, my dear children, is there any other substance, or are there any other substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant? So mainly we are focusing about those substances which are helpful for the development or for the growth of a plant, other than the factors which I have mentioned earlier, right? All the other factors which I have mentioned earlier, like the air, water, sunlight, minerals, so those things are obtained from the environment. So these things can be referred as external factors. External factors are very important for the growth. External factors are very important for the growth. But however, my dear children, we'll be focusing about within this lesson, is there any other factor, or are there any other factors, are there any substances which help for the development of a plant? So under the plant growth substances, my dear children, mainly we are focusing about those substances which are created within a plant, which are helpful for the development or for the growth of the plant. Okay. So you know that if you take the growth of an organism, right, we'll take growth of an animal, we'll take us, a human being. For the growth of a human being, you know that hormones are very important. Hormones are very important. You know that even we are growing, right? You know that even we are growing, or we grow because of the growth hormone, a special kind of a hormone which is referred as the growth hormone, right? So our height is increasing because of the hormones. Our intelligence and all the other factors, even we are maturing, or the sexual maturity of the humans are also happening because of the hormones. So hormones, if you take hormone, it is a type of a chemical substance that created within the body of human beings. Not only in human beings, these hormones can be observed within the animals as well. Okay, within the animals as well. So these chemical substances are very important, especially hormones are very important for the growth of animals, including human. So are there any chemical substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant? Of course there is, my dear children. Right? Of course there is. So about the plant growth substances, within this lesson, my dear children, we will be mainly discussing about those chemical substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant. Chemical substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant, like hormones which are going to help for the development of an animal. There are several plant growth substances, chemical substances which are helpful for the growth of a plant. So we'll be mainly focusing about these plant growth substances within this lesson, especially chemical substances, chemicals which help for the growth of a plant. So under the plant growth substances, my dear children, we'll be mainly focusing about these parts. So let's now head on to see what are the things, or what are the main topics that we are going to discuss, or what are the main types of chemicals that we are going to identify. So here we'll be mainly discussing about these plant growth chemicals, right, or these growth substances. Number one, we'll be discussing about auxins, special type of a chemical substance, right, which help for the growth of a plant. Auxins. So mainly we'll be discussing about auxins. Then secondly, we'll be discussing about gibberellins, another type of plant growth substance that can be observed within plants, gibberellins. Then in number 3, we'll be discussing about cytokinins, right? So mainly we are focusing about these 3 chemical substances under the plant growth substances. Then my dear children, you know that human beings or humans can interfere with the growth of a plant. You know that there are different types of genetical engineering things, right? In our modern scientific world, right? When you take a plant, there are certain types of genetical engineering processes which are being carried out by the scientist in order to develop good and some kind of resistive plants, disease resistive, pest resistive plants, okay, that can produce more harvest. So these scientists are going to produce those kind of things. So you know that by taking those examples, we know that, or we can get a certain idea that humans can interfere with the growth of a plant. According to the needs of the human, they're going to change the structure of the plant, right? So there are like different varieties of plants in our normal biosphere right now. That's because of the interference of the human beings. So like in the same way, here also we'll be discussing about several chemical substances which are developed by human beings. Especially those things are referred as artificial growth substances. So we'll be discussing, after discussing these things, my dear children, we'll be discussing about those artificial growth substances, different types of chemical substances created by man, which influence the growth of a plant. Okay. So after discussing these chemicals, so these chemicals are created within the plant. They are natural. Okay. These three are created within the plant. These things are natural. Natural chemical substances created within the plant itself. Right? However, we can interfere with the growth by adding these artificial growth substances as well. So after discussing these things, my dear children, we'll be discussing about several artificial growth substances that can be used to interfere with the growth of a plant. Okay. Right. So this is the brief of our lesson part that we are going to discuss on today. Right? A simple brief. So let's head on to see the first and foremost growth substance. And before that, my dear children, let's identify what do you mean by a growth substance. Already you know that it is a type of a chemical substance, right? But however, we'll identify what do you mean by a chemical substance or as a growth substance in here. So let's head on to see what do you mean by a growth substance of a plant. So here it is given introduction to plant growth substances. A simple introduction. So let's see what are the contents given now. You know that air, water, light and minerals are essential for a plant growth. It has been discovered that some chemical substances are also effect towards the plant growth. So like I said, my dear children, there are several factors which are essential for the growth of a plant. So those factors are water, minerals, sunlight, and there are plenty of substances which are essential for the growth of a plant. However, it has been identified that there are some chemical substances which are important for the plant growth as well. There are several chemical substances which are important for the growth of a plant. So here it is given chemical substances, right, which are important for the growth of a plant. There are several chemical substances. So here, have you ever thought how does a stem of a plant grows upwards and its roots grow downwards after the seed germination? Observe the figures. So here you have given with a potted plant. As you can see here, there is a potted plant. So this potted plant has been leaned down, right? It has been leaned down to the ground. However, even though it is being leaned down, it's not growing like this kind of a direction. It's always growing towards, it's growing upwards. It is growing upwards like this. Not to the direction which is being leaned, right? So here the plant stem is tending to grow upward. And also means that plant can identify the directions. Plant is going to know, right, that this is parallel to the ground and this is perpendicular to the ground. Upward means perpendicular, no? So plant can identify those directions. Okay, and according to that direction, the plant is going to grow. Right? By identifying that direction, it's going to grow. Now, if the plant is kept in the same way like this, it will grow the same way. The same process is going to happen for the plant roots as well. Always the plant roots, my dear children, are going to grow towards the ground, right? Towards the ground, roots are going to grow. So how these things are growing? How does the plant root is going to know that the ground it should grow under the ground. How should it know? What is the process? Or are there any chemical substances which helps to identify the direction? So in order to observe those things, we are going to carry out some experiments. Especially we are discussing within these experiments, is there any influence? Is there any influence of the plant apex for the growth? You know that apex is the topmost part over here. So you know that apex is the part which helps for the increase of height. Usually the height is getting increased with the development of the apex. So what we are going to do here is, we are going to observe to identify directions whether the apex is going to help or not. You know that when it is going to identify directions and when it is going to grow, apex is the part which is growing. However, we'll be focusing whether it can identify directions. Okay? Right, my dear children. So, like I said, the apex of the plant is not going to grow like this. It's going to grow always upward. Actually, growing upward is not that much suitable, but however, up to now it is okay. So now I have prepared these two systems actually, right? In your home garden also, if you want, you can do these things. You just need to take a plant and lean it like this. So now I have prepared this system in order to show you guys, right? So let's head on to lab and we'll observe these two plants, right? We'll observe these plants, my dear children. Now one has been leaned but the other has not. Okay, so let's observe the direction of growth of these two plants. So let's head on to lab and we'll focus on these two plants, my dear children. So my dear children, as you can see here, now this is a plant which I have provided the same environmental conditions, but however, these two, for the both plants I have provided the same environmental conditions, but however, when you take this plant, right, the sunlight is falling directly towards the apex of the plant. So as you can see here, the plant is growing straight up, right? But however, my dear children, I have kept this plant in a room like place where the sunlight is going to fall from a side, not from direct upward. So in that case, my dear children, what has happened to the plant? As you can see here, it's very clear to us, plant is not going to grow straight up. However, it's going to turn and grow, unlike the first instance, which is over here. So here it has gone straight up, but however, in this plant, my dear children, it's not going to grow straight up. It's going to turn and travel. This turning effect is going to result because the apex of the plant is always growing towards the sunlight. It's going after the sunlight. Apex of the plant stem is also always going to turn towards the sunlight and grow. So if the sunlight is falling directly, then we can observe this kind of a plant growth. However, if the sunlight is going to come from a certain direction, I mean like if it is going to lean to a certain direction, then the plant will also lean and travel like this. Okay, so let's head on to the classroom once again and we'll observe what are the other things contained in the lesson. Within this thing, my dear children, so you know that even the plant pot falls down, the plant grows upward and its roots go downward. So you have been asked what is the reason. So I told you that in order to identify this thing, we know that the apex is the part which is growing, so we are experimenting on apex, whether it can identify direction or whether it is going to help for the growth of a plant. Okay, we already know that apex is going to grow, but however, experimentally we are going to show it. So I told you that we are going to carry out several experiments within this lesson part in order to observe that thing. So let's head on to see those activities and experiments, my dear children. So you are given with the first and foremost activity here. So here, as I told, we are going to discuss, or we are focusing whether we can show there is a effect of apex on the plant to increase their height. So studying the effect of apex on plants to increase their height. So you know what do you mean by the apex? It is the topmost part or the final part of the shoot, like this over here. This is the apex, right? So when we are doing this activity, my dear children, we'll be mainly focusing about the apex. So like I said, I told you that for the growth, apex is very important. For the growth of a plant, apex is very important. By doing this activity, I am going to show that actually the plant is going to grow because of the apex. So let's focus about the experiment now. You'll be needing these materials when doing this experiment. So this experiment is very simple. You'll be needing like 2 potted plants with similar heights. Okay, if you can't find out these things with similar height, my dear children, you know, like you can grow 2 plants by using seeds. Okay, and you can keep these 2 plants, right, on a same pot for about few weeks. Then after, you know that you can get plants with similar heights. Okay, but however, now in order to do this activity, I have prepared a system, right? So nearly I have 2 potted plants with same heights, nearly same heights. Okay, it's no need to be accurately in the same height. I mean, if you are going to take one plant as 5 centimeters, let's imagine that one plant is 5 centimeters. Okay, then no need, actually the other plant cannot be at the same height. No, most of the times it will not, but however, at least for about nearly it's going to go around 5 centimeters is okay, like 4.5, 4, that would be fine. Okay, I just took an example. So usually when you take a plant, it's more than that, like it's going to take up to 30 centimeters and so on, right? So however, you have to take 2 potted plants that have similar heights, okay, or with same heights. Nearly same heights are okay, no problem, right? So what are the materials you need, my dear children? 2 potted plants within brackets I'll include with nearly same height. With nearly same height. Okay, you will be needing 2 potted plants with nearly same height, right? So these are the 2 materials that you need. It's a very simple activity. Now let's head on to see what is our method. So method is very simple. It is given in the figure, my dear children. You have to take the 2 potted plants, okay, then you have to cut in one particular plant, you have to cut off the apex. So as you can see here, the apex is being removed now. In the second one, apex is being removed. But in the first one, the apex is there. We are not changing the apex in the first one. In the second, however, you have to cut and remove the apex. Then you have to keep the two plants for few days. Then you have to observe the height. What has happened with the height? Okay. So it's better if you can measure the height of this one, right? And this one, before doing this, before keeping it for a few days, okay? Then after few days, you can measure the height of the two plants, okay? After few days, you can measure the height. So this is our experiment. By doing this experiment, we are going to find out whether the apex is going to affect for the development of a plant or for the growth of a plant. Okay. So you know that if the height is going to increase in this particular plant, then we know that apex is the one which is growing, or apex is the one which helps for the development or for the growth of the plant given in the first figure. If the second plant is not going to grow, if the second plant height of the second plant is going to remain with the same height, then we can say that then definitely for sure we can say that, or we can come into a conclusion that apex is going to affect for the growth of a plant. Without the apex, the height of the plant will not increase. Okay. So this is our experiment. So it's very simple. What we have to do, you have to take the two potted plants. In the first plant, you keep the apex in the same way. In the second one, you're going to remove the apex. Then after, right, after few days, you are going to observe the heights. You are going to observe the height. So if the height has been increased in the first plant, and if the height is going to remain the same in the second plant, then we can come into conclusion that apex is very important for the increase of height or for the growth of a plant. Okay, right. So let's write down our method, my dear children, of doing this activity. So what is the method? Very simple. First of all, what you have to do? You have to remove the apex of the first plant or the second plant. Let's see, we'll write it as remove the apex of one plant. Okay, just a one plant. So cut off the apex of a plant according to the figure then keep the apex of the second plant, of the other plant. Okay, right? So cut off the apex of a plant according to the figure, keep the apex of the other plant as the same. Then observe observe the growth of two plants, observe the growth of two plants after few days. So this is our method, right? This is the method of conducting the activity. It's very simple. What you have to do? You have to cut off the apex of a plant according to the figure which is given in here, right? Keep the apex of the other plant as the same, right? Observe the growth of two plants after few days. So if you want, I can name these two figures as, this is plant 1 and this is plant 2. Okay, so I'll mention here, this is plant 2. This is plant 1. So you know that we took these two plants to have the same height. So after removing the apex, the height is not going to change that much. I mean, like, it's going to change like up to a very small bit of a height. But however, it's not going to change in a dramatical amount. Okay. So after removing the apex, sometimes we won't be able to observe a change, right? So that the removal of the apex, let's imagine that the removal of the apex is not going to affect for the height of the plant in the first situation. Let's imagine that at the first situation, when I'm going to remove the apex of the second plant, the two plants are at the same height. Let's imagine that. However, you know that there is no considerable change, but there is a small bit of a change. Okay, there's a small bit of a change. However, as we took these two in the same height, let's imagine that during the after the removal of the apex in the second plant, right, the two plants are at the same height. Let's imagine like that when we are doing the activity, right? I'm going to show that actually it's not going to affect that much amount. Okay, when I'm doing the activity after removal of the apex, I'm going to show that it's not going to affect to the to a higher level or to a higher value, right? So this is the way of doing the activity, my dear children. So here we are focusing whether there is a effect of the apex of the plant for the growth. Okay, so let's head on to the lab and we'll conduct the activity, and let's see which plant is going to increase the height and which plant is not going to increase the height. By that way, we'll come into our conclusions and we'll see whether the apex has an effect of the growth of the plant. So let's head on to the laboratory and we'll conduct the activity. Right, my dear children. Now here I have two potted plants. As you can see here, their heights are like at the same level. So within this activity, what we are going to do is, we are going to select these two plants, and in one particular plant, I'm going to remove the apex. Okay. Then after that, we are going to keep it for several time. I mean, like for a week or two. Then we are going to study about the height. Okay. Now it's better to observe the height day by day. But however, within this activity, I'm going to remove the apex, and after like a week or two, I'm going to observe what has happened with the height. Okay, because we can get a very clear observation after like week or two, because after like week or two, this plant or the particular plant item which is going to grow, we will grow up to a certain height, and the plant item which is not going to grow will remain in the same. Okay, so what we have to do is very simple. Select one of these item and remove the apex of it. So I'll use this black color one and I'll remove the apex. So this is the apex, my dear children. So let's remove it. Okay, so I have removed it right now. So as you can see here, the height of the plant, when you compare the height of the plant, it is around the same height. Remember it, it's around the same height, like at the same height, even after removing this apex part. Okay, so it was like in this kind of a position, right? So this plant is like similar to the height of the other plant. Now what we are going to do is we are going to check this system after like week or two, and let's see what has happened with the system. So my dear children, now this is our result. So I have kept this system for about 2 weeks. Now you can clearly observe what has happened with the system. This is the plant which I did not cut the apex. However, this is the plant which I have removed the apex. As you can see here very clearly, now in the earlier case, right, the height was at the same level, but now you can see that apex has grown up to a certain height in the second plant, which I never removed the apex part. So here the apex has been grown, right? However, the plant which the apex was removed, the height of that plant at the same level. This is slightly grown. However, the plant which I have removed the apex, the height of that plant is at the same level. So my dear children, it's very clear to us that for the growth, right, of the plant apex, right, so for the growth of the plant, apex is going to give out a certain kind of an impact for the growth of the plant. Apex is the one which is growing actually. Okay, so this is our clear observation from the setup. So it's very obvious to us that the plant apex is always the one which is going to grow. So let's head on to the classroom once again and we'll discuss what are the other things contained within the lesson. Right, my dear children. So like I said, it's very obvious to us that after keeping the system for few days, you can clearly observe that the plant which the apex has been removed is not going to grow. It remains in the same height. However, the other plant which has the apex, it is going to grow and increase the height. So there is a clear change between the two heights, okay, of the plants. There is a clear change between the heights. So it's very obvious to us that apex has a direct influence on change in the height of a plant. That means apex of the plant has a direct influence on the growth of a plant. Okay, so we'll write down our observations then. So our observations are quite simple. What are our observations? The plant with apex has grown. Plant with apex has grown. How can we say that? Because the height has increased. Okay, then plant without apex did not show any change, right? So plant with apex has grown, height has increased. Plant without apex did not show any change, right? Plant without apex did not show any change. So conclusion from the activity, my dear children, what is that? Apex affect the growth affects the growth of a plant, right? So this is our conclusion. So we have discussed to do the way of doing the activity, and I have shown you the activity as well, my dear children. So it's very simple, this experiment. Even you can do this thing at your home. So by doing this particular activity, I have shown to you guys that the apex of a plant is very important for the growth of a plant. Actually, the height of a plant is going to increase because of the apex. So here we experimentally proved it. Okay, right. So we know that apex is going to affect the growth of a plant. Okay, apex is going to affect for the growth of a plant. So let's observe whether there is a effect between the direction of growth and the apex. So we are going to observe whether the growth is going to happen always towards up. You know that when you keep a plant in a horizontal position, right, it's going to grow vertically upward even though it is in a horizontal position. In the earlier lesson part, we discussed that even though that potted plant is laying down, it's going to grow upward. Even though I'm going to place it horizontally, it's going to grow vertically upward. So by doing a very particular activity, we are going to discuss, right? We are going to discuss whether there is a, right, whether there is a direction of, whether there is a relationship between the direction of growth with the apex. Okay, whether there is a relationship between direction of growth or direction of increase in height with the apex. So we'll be identifying that particular feature within our next activity. Okay. So, I'm going to give you a simple example here, my dear children. You have seen that there are some coconut plants. Sometimes you may have seen these. There are some coconut plants which are not going to grow straight up. Sometimes they are going to lean like this, then travel upward. It's because the apex is always not going to grow vertically upward. Sometimes the apex is changing that direction to a different direction. So we'll be observing what is that particular factor which is going to affect for the growth of the apex. Okay. So now let's head on to observe that activity. Right. Then the second activity, my dear children. Once again, we are studying the effect of the apex on plants to increase their height. But here we'll be doing a different activity here. So this is the activity number 2. So once again you will be needing 2 potted plants with similar heights. Okay, 2 potted plants with same height. Then we'll be needing a black box. Right, we'll be needing a black box like this. We'll be needing black box like this, my dear children. Okay, so here within the black box you can see that there are two holes, right? There are 2 holes. So I'll mention with 2 holes. Okay, so with 2 holes there is a black box. So we'll be needing these materials. Okay, so the way of doing this experiment is very simple once again. So you have to keep these 2 plants inside the black box. But before that, like in the previous, you have to cut off the apex of one plant. Okay, cut off the apex of one plant and keep the 2 plants within the black box. Okay, so this is our activity. But that's not enough. You have to keep this thing, keep the black box near a window pane so that the holes will get sunlight or light. Okay, you have to keep the black box near a window pane or view of a window. Near a window pane, you keep near a window pane. Then always keep the window pane open during the daytime. Okay, then observe the growth of the plants after 5 days. Okay, observe the growth of the plants after 5 days. So here we are going to observe whether the apex is always growing vertically upward or not. Right? We are going to observe whether the apex is always growing vertically upward or not. Okay, right then. So the method, as you can see, it's very simple. Here within this figure you can clearly observe in the plant the apex has been removed. The second one over here, this is the first one, this is the second one. So the first one over here, apex remains the same. There is no change in the apex. However, in the second one, you can clearly see that the apex has been removed. Apex has been removed. So both the plants are now inside the black box. So you have to keep the black box near a window so that it will receive sunlight. Okay, so this is our activity, my dear children. So we'll write down the method first. So what is the method? It's really simple. Cut off the apex in a plant and keep the apex in the same keep the apex of the other plant. Okay. So cut off the apex in a plant and keep the apex of the other. Okay. So in the first plant you can remove the apex, but in the second, however, you have to keep it in the same, right? Then place the two plants in the box near to holes according to the figure. Then what you have to do? Place two plants in the box near two holes according to the figure. So as per to the figure given here, you have to keep the two plants near the two holes, right? Then place the box to get sunlight and observe after few days. So you can keep the system anywhere, but however, remember it should get plenty of sunlight. It should have to receive sunlight to grow, no? So we have to keep in a place, we have to keep this system in a place to get sunlight. Okay, right. So here, first of all, we need to cut off the apex in a plant and keep the apex of the other. Then place two plants in the box near two holes according to the figure. So near the two holes, you have to keep the two plants, but however, the two plants should be within the box. Okay, that should be in the box. Then place the box to get sunlight and observe after few days. So you have to keep the box to get sunlight and you have to observe this thing after few days. So this is our experiment, my dear children. Okay, so let's head on to lab and we'll conduct the activity and let's see whether the apex is always growing upward or not. Okay, so let's head on to see and we'll observe the observations from the activity. So my dear children, this is the setup that I have prepared. So I have kept this for a few weeks. I have removed the apex of the first plant, right? And I have kept this system for a few weeks. Now let's observe what is the difference, or like what kind of a difference has occurred within the two plants. So the plant which is over here, you can see it very clearly, this one, right? This plant. So here the apex is now growing towards the the space which I have removed from the box. Means that it is growing outside the box from the gap over here. However, the one which is over here, right, there's no such development, there's no such growth. It's because, right, in here within this one, my dear children, I have removed the apex. So you can clearly see that it's not growing significantly like in the previous one over here, right? Here the apex is growing, right? Here the apex is growing, my dear children. Here you can see it very clearly. The apex is growing towards the area or towards the light from the removed part of the box. So it's very clear to us that within this experiment, the apex of the plant is always growing towards the light. If the apex is not there, right, then we can't observe a significant growth like the previous case. So apex is directly responsible for the growth of a plant. So once again, let's head on to the classroom and we'll study the further things related with our lesson. Right, my dear children. So we conducted the activity and you could clearly observe that the plant without the apex is not going to grow, right? However, plant that has the apex is not going to grow upward this time. Here the apex is growing towards the light. How can we say that? Because you could clearly observe that the apex of the first plant is going to grow towards that hole where the light is going to be there. Okay, so we kept the system in a place to get sunlight. No, sunlight is being received to the system by those two holes. So according to the direction where the sunlight is going to receive, the apex is also turning towards that direction. It's not going to grow always upward. Actually, apex of the plant is going to grow towards the direction of light. So like I said in the earlier, when we before I'm going to conduct the activity, I told you that you have been seen sometimes you have been seen there are several coconut plants which are going to turn like this and then grow straight. So those coconut plants are also first of all finding out the direction of sunlight, then grow to that particular direction. So when the sunlight is going to fall vertically downward, then it is going to grow vertically upward to the direction of the sunlight. Okay, if the sunlight is not received directly from the top, then that plant is going to lean and travel upward. First it will lean to a certain direction where the sunlight is there, then it will go upward after that leaning process. So that's why, my dear children, those coconut plants are not going to go straight up. If the sunlight is there, if the sunlight is going to fall vertically downwards on the apex of the plant, then it's going to grow vertically up without any trouble. However, if the sunlight is receiving at a leaned direction, then the plant will also lean and travel to that direction. Then after after the sunlight is going to receive vertically down, then it will grow in a vertical direction. So by doing this activity, we can come into conclusion that apex is always growing towards the light. That means apex is directly going to affect for the growth of a plant. Even the apex can determine the direction of growth of the plant. The direction of the growth of the plant is going to determine by the apex. Okay, right then. So we'll write down our observation. What is the observation? Apex of the plant, or we can say plant that has the apex. Plant that has the apex is growing So still I'll mention it like this. Still it is growing, so we'll mention it as growing. Okay, so plant that has the apex is growing towards the whole right, or else we can remove this thing. Let's remove this thing, it's much better. Now here we are discussing about the influence direction of the influence with the growth, no, not with the sunlight thing. So here let's mention about the growth only. Okay, so here we can see that plant that has the apex is growing towards the hole. So that's our observation. Okay, that is our observation. Towards the hole, the plant that has the apex is going to grow. But however, there is no change in the other plant. Right, there is no change in other plant. So this is our observation. Now we'll write down the conclusion. So our conclusion is quite simple. What is the conclusion, my dear children? Our conclusion is, now by doing these two activity, we discussed that first of all, now let's, within the beginning of this lesson part, we discussed that we are going to find out the influence or the effect of the apex for the growth of the plant. So by doing these two activity, we proved that there is a direct relationship between the growth of the plant and with the apex of the plant. If there is an apex, then the plant is going to grow, and the apex is always growing towards the light, towards the sunlight. So we can say that number one, apex of the plant affect the growth. Then secondly, apex grows towards sunlight. So it's not proper to include this thing over the observation, right? Because that is the conclusion that we took, no? So I have mentioned that thing under the conclusion. It's much better. So apex of the plant affect the growth. This is our first conclusion. Okay, from this activity. From this activity also we can conclude that apex of the plant is going to directly influence on the growth of the plant. Then the second conclusion, apex grows towards sunlight. I told within the beginning of the lesson, I told you that the apex is going vertically up, but however it's not going to grow vertically up. In that case, it's going to grow vertically up because the sunlight is received from the top. That's why it is going to grow vertically up. If the sunlight is coming from a leaned direction, then it will lean, and after receiving from the top, it will travel to the top like this. I mean, it will travel vertically upward. Okay. So always remember, my dear children, the apex is growing towards the sunlight. Apex is growing towards the sunlight. And also, if it is going towards sunlight, we can directly say that apex is going to create an influence between the growth of the plant. Okay, there is a direct relationship between the apex, between the growth. Okay, right. So these are our two activities to show that the effect of apex for the growth. Okay, now let's head on to see what are our other things contained within the lesson. Now within this lesson part, we discussed that and we proved that there is an influence or there is an effect between the apex and the growth. Right. So here, plant with the apex grows to the direction of light, and the plant without the apex does not turn towards the light. So it's quite obvious to us that even we wrote down that thing in our observation as well. There's no change. But however, if there is an apex, then it's going to change the direction and travel. Okay, then we can come to a conclusion that there is an effect of the apex on the growth of a plant. So we discussed that thing, right? Okay. The chemical compounds which regulate the growth of a plant are known as plant growth substances. Now we come into the definition of plant growth substances. Plant growth substance is a chemical substance that helps for the growth of a plant. Chemical substance that helps for the growth of a plant. Okay, chemical substance that helps for the growth of a plant. Actually, apex is containing those chemicals. That's why it is going to grow to certain directions. Right? So, growth of the plant is affected by the apex. And apex has those growth chemicals or growth substances. That's why it is going to change the direction and travel, or that's why it is going to grow to a particular direction. Then the next point is given. Some growth substances promote the growth of a plant. See, promote. Promoting means increasing. That means it is giving out a support for the growth. It increases the rate of growth. Okay. So there are some growth substances that can increase the rate of growth. It can increase the rate of growth. So like in the apex. Okay. So there are particular types of chemicals in the apex. Okay. So those chemicals are going to help for the growth process. Means that those chemicals can help to increase the height of the plant. Okay. So apex contains those growth chemicals. That's why the apex is going to grow. If there is no apex, then the height is not going to change, my dear children. Okay. Then the height is not going to change. We discussed that thing by doing activities also. Okay. So it's because that within the other parts, we can't observe these growth chemicals or growth substances. That's why the height is not going to change. However, the apex is going to contain these things. Okay, right. So there are some substances that can promote the growth. So apex has chemical substances that can promote or that can accelerate or that can increase the rate of growth. Okay, so the growth chemicals contained within the apex of a plant is going to promote the growth of a plant. Then, while some inhibit the growth of a plant, and also there are some other examples, right? When we are discussing about the lesson further, we'll be discussing about those things as well. So there are some certain chemicals that can inhibit the growth of a certain part of a plant. Inhibiting means avoiding or decelerating, decreasing. So there are some growth substances that can promote the growth, and there are some certain substances, growth substances, that can decrease or inhibits the growth. Okay, but only in certain parts, my dear children, not all, but in certain parts. Okay, so these substances which can influence with the growth of a certain plant is called as growth substances. So plant growth substances are the chemicals that can influence the growth of a certain plant. Right. So this is what do you mean by a growth substance, my dear children. Right. So now you got a good knowledge about the growth substances. So growth substances are the ones that helps for the growth. These are chemical substances, remember. These chemical substances created within the plant. So we identified that apex of the plant carries some growth substances. That's why it is going to increase the height. So in the next chapter, we'll be discussing what are the main types of chemicals that can be identified with within this apex to increase the height. Right, my dear children? So we'll be discussing further things related to the lesson within our next chapter. Especially, my dear children, we'll be discussing about these chemical substances one by one each, which are going to help for the development of the plant. Okay, so I'm going to come within our next chapter to study about these chemicals, right? So I'm going to finish up with this chapter, my dear children. So let's meet up with the next chapter to discuss about those components.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.